Yeah, right.
Welcome back, everyone. We've been following this story for months now, and every time we learn a little bit more about it, I feel like we're going to bring a guest on so you can be more aware of this topic. It involves tip credit and the service industry, and it particularly hits the hospitality, restaurant industry. And joining me today, a friend of mine, Brendan Dillon, who's the owner of arguably the best restaurant in Saratoga, Hamlet Ghost.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Welcome, Brendan. Brendan and I, unfortunately, can share a couple of stories about floods. I think you were on here once.
We've both been through it.
We've both been through it, and we're both on the other side of it.
That's right.
Well, thanks for taking the time to come in.
Thank you.
Always great to see you, of course. This tip credit thing, just generally speaking, in case you want to try to catch up to this, there's something before the New York State Legislature that would take away the tip credit that, let's just say, waiters and waitresses, let's use that as an example, receive in addition to the bill. And the thought there is that take that tip credit away, raise the minimum wage for that worker, and change the structure. Boy, there are a lot of people confused about it.
Yeah,
and a lot of
confusing
people
subject.
Are just like, why would you find a solution for a problem that doesn't exist?
For sure.
So tell me about it from your perspective. You've really been in the business for a while.
Yeah, I mean, the tip credit is what allows an employee to make one wage, so a lower minimum wage, because they know that wage is going to be made up in tips. So,
yes, right.
If you have a regular minimum wage of say $10.50, we can pay servers or bartenders or anyone who's tipped in the front of the house $7.25, knowing that they're going to get a certain amount of tips each week, and that has to equal up to more than minimum wage.
Yes.
So, it's a subsidy, it's a labor subsidy, and it really creates a lot of the drive for servers and bartenders because they can, make a really nice living off of gratuity. And we're going through this conversation of changing a way where we pay everybody, the regular minimum wage, and then all of a sudden you can disperse these kind of tips in a different way. And it's interesting to see where it's going to go. I think it's really, the way they're going about it is going to cause a lot of disruption in the industry. And, I think it really kind of, if it's not done in a more appropriate way, will really affect people's livelihoods and affect a lot of restaurants across New York.
Well, you know what, Brent? It seems like people are trying to rush into this. There's always the suspicion that by doing this, that, you hear this said frequently, that people at the front of the house will only declare a certain amount of the tips they get, so that deprives New York State of some of the tax revenue. So there's always that you're always suspicious of politicians when that one rears its head. But there's things like servers try harder when there's an incentive involved. If your livelihood depends on a tip, well, maybe that service will be a little bit better. There are some things about discrepancy between what I understand to be the front of the house and the back of the house.
Sure.
Explain that just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think certain people would argue that there's pros and cons to both sides, to moving away from a tipped system and from a tip credit to a system where, say, service charges are dispersed more equally among the front of the house and the back of the house. Again, that's not something that I personally would be opposed to exploring, but it's something that would need to be done with a scalpel and very carefully and done over a pretty significant amount of time to not have the really severe impact that's going to come with this kind of quick legislation change.
There are subtleties in this conversation that you should know. There's a difference between a gratuity and a service charge.
Yeah.
So that even if a gratuity is imposed, you sometimes you'll see parties of 10 or more, 18% gratuity or service charge included, just to make certain that the people are compensated properly when there's a big group. But there's a difference in that terminology, right?
Yeah, so a gratuity means that money is going to get dispersed to front of the house employees who have interactions with the guests. Yes, they have that contact with the guests. Sometimes in more like banquet and wedding settings, you'll see, there's a service charge on the check. A lot of people might think those are the same thing, but they're not. Service charge, a operator could take, say, 10% to the house and give 10% back to the front of the house, or disperse it as they wish. So, it's really, two small little words, but it has a huge difference on how the operator can either hold on to that money or has to disperse it back to employees.
Very hard to try to figure out if this should be done. If it's not something we're going to vote on either, right? This is something that the governor is going to decide.
Yeah, he has the control over the tax.
Okay, so if you're involved at all or know somebody that's involved in the industry, you might want to contact Albany and let them know how you feel about this. And there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and a lot of different ways that it can work and a lot of ways it can't work. Brendan said something to me I thought was very interesting, is that it takes time to learn from the process, and that you try certain things and then adapt what works and what doesn't work to make it a more equitable system for everybody.
Yeah. And that's something I could see be done in the future if it was done in a very careful manner. I think there's, again, I'm someone who kind of falls on the side of that there's pros and cons to a tip system and a non-tip system. But, we're talking about, this is a much easier transition for a company in New York City that has, tens of millions of dollars in revenue versus, most of us in Saratoga who are working off much slimmer margins and much less revenue. So, having the team to make that changeover, this is a lot more difficult in small towns and in upstate New York.
Well, I think that's well taken. I mean, I've known you for a long time. You take quite a bit of pride in your work, and Hamlet Ghost is a perfect example, from the music to the decor to the food to the way people treat you there. And that's the personality. And the personality has a lot of moving parts, and how they interact and who gets what for what they provide in that environment is critically important to the success of a restaurant, which generally doesn't have a big margin, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have a lot of love for hospitality. I have a lot of love for this industry.
You
So,
do.
it's people who are very hardworking, and they're really hardworking to make other people happy. I mean, it's it's about making a profit and keeping open, but it's about us making our employees happy. It's about us making the guests happy, and I think that's what drives a lot of us. And I think I fall on the side that I would hate to see something passed that's really a detriment to this industry. So,
especially a restaurant of your size. If you're a big, huge player in New York City or something like that, maybe you look at it differently. Well, Brendan, thanks very much for taking the time
my pleasure.
to come in and catch up with you. And I'm coming over for the gnocchi, okay?
Yeah, I'd love to just say, if you want to find out more about this, talk to Nancy Bombera, talk to Beth Alexander from Hattie's. These are the people who are really driving the conversation for what's going on right now. They're a lot more in tune to what's going on than I am. And they've got the Facebook groups, and they've got everything. If you want to find out more details about how this is going to affect everybody, those are the people to get a hold of and have a good conversation with.
Got it, Brett. Good. Great to see you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.